The sound of tiny feet running across marble floors echoed through the Miami mansion as 4-year-old Gianna burst into tears. "Mama, Camilla!" she cried, her small arms reaching desperately for the young Italian woman who had just entered the grand foyer. Serena Conti's perfectly manicured hand shot out, grabbing the child's wrist with cold precision. "She is not your mother." The words cut through the air like ice, her emerald eyes blazing with fury as she stared down at the little girl. "Stop this ridiculous behavior immediately." But Gianna only cried harder, struggling against Serena's grip as she reached toward Camilla, the 24-year-old nanny whose gentle presence had become her entire world. From the top of the grand staircase, Adriano Bianchi watched the scene unfold, his jaw clenched tight beneath his perfectly groomed beard. The powerful Mafia boss had built an empire on control, on calculated decisions that served his family's interests. His engagement to Serena was supposed to unite two of Miami's most influential Italian families, securing peace and prosperity for generations. But as he watched his daughter's desperate tears and saw the pain flash across Camilla's warm brown eyes, Adriano felt something crack inside his chest, something he'd kept locked away since the night his wife died 3 years ago. The little girl's sobs filled the mansion, and for the first time in years the most feared man in Miami felt completely powerless. Welcome to Passion and Power. You're about to dive into a story that will make your heart race and your emotions soar. Comment below where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us as we bring you the most captivating romance stories. Let's begin this incredible journey together. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Bianchi mansion in Coral Gables, casting golden light across the pristine white marble floors. Camilla Romano moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing Gianna's breakfast with the same careful attention she gave everything in her life. 6 months ago, she had arrived in Miami with nothing but a worn suitcase and a heart full of dreams. The small village outside Naples, where she'd grown up, offered little opportunity for a young woman with ambitions beyond marriage and motherhood. When the agency in Italy had offered her a position as a live-in nanny for a wealthy American family, she'd seized the chance without hesitation. She hadn't known then that the wealthy American family was headed by one of the most powerful men in Miami's underworld. "Buongiorno, piccola Stella," Camilla whispered as Gianna padded into the kitchen in her pink pajamas, dark curls tumbling around her sleepy face. The little girl's eyes lit up at the sight of her nanny, and she immediately wrapped her small arms around Camilla's legs. "Good morning, Mama Camilla," Gianna replied, mixing Italian and English in the way that had become natural since Camilla's arrival. "Did you make the special pancakes?" Camilla's heart squeezed at the title the child had given her. She'd tried gently correcting it at first, but Gianna had looked so confused and hurt that Camilla had eventually stopped. The little girl had lost her mother when she was barely 2 years old, and if calling Camilla Mama brought her comfort, who was she to take that away? "Of course, tesoro, with extra chocolate chips, just how you like them." As Camilla flipped the pancakes, she heard the familiar sound of expensive Italian leather shoes against marble. Her pulse quickened involuntarily, a reaction she'd been trying to suppress for weeks now. Adriano Bianchi entered the kitchen like he owned the world, which, in many ways, he did. At 32, he commanded respect from men twice his age and fear from those who crossed him. His perfectly tailored charcoal suit emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame, while his white dress shirt was left unbuttoned at the top, revealing a glimpse of the intricate tattoo that curved along the side of his neck. The platinum Rolex on his wrist caught the morning light as he reached down to ruffle his daughter's hair, and Camilla found herself staring at the gentle way his large hands touched the little girl. "Papa!" Gianna squealed, abandoning her breakfast to launch herself into her father's arms. "Camilla made the special pancakes." Did she now? Adriano's deep voice carried a slight Italian accent, softened by years in America, but still unmistakably Mediterranean. His dark eyes met Camilla's over his daughter's head, and she felt that familiar flutter in her stomach that she absolutely could not afford to feel. "Good morning, Mr. Bianchi," she said formally, turning back to the stove to hide the flush creeping up her neck. "Adriano," he corrected, as he had every morning for the past month. "We've discussed this, Camilla." The way he said her name, with that slight roll of the R and the emphasis on the last syllable, made her knees weak. She busied herself with plating Gianna's breakfast, trying to ignore the way his presence seemed to fill the entire kitchen. "Serena is coming for lunch today," Adriano announced, settling Gianna into her chair at the breakfast nook. "She wants to discuss wedding preparations." The words hit Camilla like a physical blow, though she kept her expression carefully neutral. She'd met Serena Conti exactly 3 times, and each encounter had left her feeling smaller and more insignificant than the last. Serena was everything Camilla wasn't. Sophisticated, wealthy, connected to the right families. Her platinum blonde hair was always perfectly styled. Her designer clothes fit like they'd been sewn onto her body, and she spoke to Camilla like she was part of the furniture. "Of course," Camilla replied quietly. "I'll make sure Gianna and I stay out of the way." "That won't be necessary," Adriano said, his voice carrying an edge she didn't understand. "This is your home too." The words sent warmth flooding through her chest, but she pushed the feeling down. This wasn't her home. It was a temporary stop on a journey she hadn't yet figured out. And Adriano wasn't hers to want, no matter how her heart raced when he looked at her like he was doing right now. "Papa, will you read to me tonight?" Gianna asked around a mouthful of pancakes. "Camilla started the princess book, but I want you to do the dragon voice." "Of course, Stelina. But you need to finish your breakfast first." As Adriano moved around the kitchen, preparing his espresso with the expensive machine that had been shipped directly from Italy, Camilla couldn't help but notice the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders, the confident way he moved through space like he owned every inch of it. She was so lost in her observations that she didn't notice Francesca, the mansion's long-time cook, entering the kitchen until the older woman cleared her throat. "Scusi, Mr. Bianchi," Francesca said in her heavily accented English. "Your father called. He wants to see you this morning before Miss Conti arrives." Adriano's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Did he say what about?" "Wedding business, I think." Camilla saw something flash across Adriano's face. Frustration. Maybe even anger. But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Tell him I'll be there within the hour," he said, downing his espresso in one smooth motion. He kissed the top of Gianna's head and moved toward the door, but paused when he reached Camilla's side. For a moment she thought he might say something, might acknowledge the strange tension that had been building between them for weeks. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you for taking such good care of her." But the way he looked at her when he said it, like she was precious, like she mattered, made her breath catch in her throat. After he left, Francesca moved closer to Camilla, her weathered face creased with concern. "Be careful, Bambina," the older woman said quietly in Italian. "Some paths lead to heartbreak." Camilla nodded, but as she watched Gianna giggle over her breakfast, she wondered if it was already too late for careful. She was falling for a man she could never have, in a world where she would never truly belong. But when Gianna reached for her hand and smiled up at her with chocolate chip-stained lips, Camilla couldn't bring herself to regret a single moment of the past 6 months, even if they were leading her straight toward disaster. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mansion's formal dining room as Serena Conti surveyed the table settings with the critical eye of a woman accustomed to perfection. Her ice blue dress complemented her platinum hair, and diamonds sparkled at her throat, a reminder of the wealth and status she brought to her engagement with Adriano. "The flowers are wrong," she announced to no one in particular, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been told no. "I specifically requested white roses, not these, whatever these are." Camilla, who had spent the morning arranging the pale pink peonies from Adriano's garden, felt her cheeks burn. "I'm sorry, Miss Conti. Mr. Bianchi mentioned you preferred—" "I don't recall asking for your opinion." Serena cut her off with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Perhaps you could focus on keeping the child quiet during lunch. Some of us have important matters to discuss." From the kitchen doorway, Gianna peeked around Camilla's legs, her dark eyes wide with confusion. The little girl had been excited all morning about showing Serena the picture she'd drawn, but now she pressed closer to Camilla's side, sensing the tension in the air. "Of course," Camilla replied quietly, lifting Gianna into her arms. "We'll be upstairs if you need anything." "We won't," Serena said dismissively, already turning away to examine the crystal wine glasses. As Camilla carried Gianna toward the staircase, she heard the front door open and the sound of Adriano's voice as he greeted his fiancée. She forced herself not to look back, not to watch as he kissed Serena's cheek in the perfunctory way of people fulfilling obligations rather than expressing affection. "Why doesn't she like us, Mama Camilla?" Gianna whispered against her neck as they climbed the stairs. Camilla's heart clenched at the question. How could she explain to a 4-year-old that some people saw love as a threat to their carefully constructed plans? "Some people just need time to warm up, Tesoro," she said instead. "Why don't we work on your puzzle while they have their lunch?" But as they settled in Gianna's playroom, the sound of raised voices drifted up from below. Camilla tried to distract the little girl with games and stories, but she couldn't help straining to hear the conversation happening downstairs. "Wedding is in 6 weeks, Adriano. 6 weeks, and you're acting like it's some kind of inconvenience. I'm handling the arrangements, Serena. Everything will be ready. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're more concerned with playing house with your little domestic help than planning our future." Camilla's blood ran cold. She pulled Gianna closer, grateful that the child was absorbed in her coloring book and couldn't understand the venom in Serena's voice. "Careful." Adriano's voice carried a warning that made even Camilla shiver. "You're talking about someone who cares for my daughter. Your daughter who calls the help Mama." "Yes, I've noticed. It's inappropriate, Adriano, and it needs to stop." The silence that followed was deafening. Camilla found herself holding her breath, waiting for Adriano's response. "Gianna lost her mother when she was barely more than a baby," he said finally, his voice deadly quiet. "If she finds comfort in Camilla's presence, I won't take that away from her." Comfort? Serena's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "She's getting attached to someone who's temporary. What happens when the girl decides to go back to Italy, or when she finds some young man to marry? You're setting your daughter up for another abandonment." Camilla pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting back tears. She hadn't thought about it that way, hadn't considered how her eventual departure might affect Gianna. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "That's enough," Adriano said, but Serena wasn't finished. "I'm thinking about our family's future. When we're married, I won't have some lovesick girl undermining my authority in my own home. The nanny goes or I do." The ultimatum hung in the air like a blade. Camilla closed her eyes, knowing with sick certainty what Adriano's choice would have to be. Serena represented stability, alliance, the continuation of everything his family had built. Camilla was just a girl from a small Italian village who'd stumbled into their lives. She was already mentally packing her suitcase when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Adriano appeared in the doorway of the playroom, his face a mask of controlled fury. His white dress shirt was wrinkled, the top buttons still undone, and his dark hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it. "Papa!" Gianna launched herself at him, and Camilla watched as his expression immediately softened. "Ciao, Stellina. Are you having fun with Camilla?" "We're coloring. Look, I made you a picture of our house." Gianna held up a drawing that showed 3 stick figures standing in front of a large building. A tall, dark-haired man, a smaller woman with brown hair, and a tiny girl between them. Adriano's eyes met Camilla's over his daughter's head, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his gaze that made her chest tight. "It's beautiful, Tesoro," he said softly. "Why don't you go show Francesca? I think she's making gelato in the kitchen." Gianna squealed with delight and raced out of the room, leaving Camilla alone with Adriano for the first time in weeks. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "I should start looking for another position," Camilla said quietly, unable to meet his eyes. "Miss Conti is right. It's not appropriate for Gianna to get so attached." "No." The word came out sharper than he'd intended, and he stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and distinctly masculine. "You're not going anywhere." "Adriano." She finally looked up at him, and the intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. "This situation, it's complicated. Your fiancé can go to hell," he finished, his voice rough with an emotion she didn't dare name. They stood there for a moment, the air between them crackling with tension. Camilla was acutely aware of how close he was, of the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. of the small scar above his left eyebrow that she'd noticed weeks ago and wondered about ever since. "You can't say things like that," she whispered. "People like me don't get to keep people like you." Something flickered across his face, pain maybe, or recognition. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with the backs of his fingers. "What if I don't want to be kept?" he said quietly. "What if I want to be chosen?" Before she could respond, before she could process what he meant, the sound of Serena's heels clicking across the marble downstairs broke the spell. Adriano dropped his hand and stepped back, the walls going up around him again. "We'll continue this conversation later," he said, his voice back to its usual controlled tone. But as he walked away, Camilla caught sight of his reflection in the window and saw a man who looked as lost and conflicted as she felt. Downstairs, she could hear Serena's voice, sharp and demanding, discussing flower arrangements and guest lists as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. In the space of a few words, a simple touch, Adriano had shifted the entire foundation of Camilla's world, and she had no idea what she was supposed to do about it. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Serena, and the mansion felt like a powder keg waiting to explode. Camilla moved through her daily routines with mechanical precision, hyper-aware of every glance, every accidental touch, every moment when she and Adriano found themselves alone. The tension was affecting Gianna too. The little girl had grown clingy and anxious, sensing the undercurrents of conflict even if she couldn't understand them. She refused to let Camilla out of her sight and had started having nightmares again, something that hadn't happened since Camilla's first month at the mansion. It was nearly midnight when the soft crying from Gianna's room pulled Camilla from her restless sleep. She patted down the hallway in her cotton pajamas and robe, her bare feet silent on the cool marble. "Shh, tesoro," she whispered, settling on the edge of Gianna's bed and smoothing the dark curls away from the child's tear-stained face. "It was just a bad dream." Mama went away again. Gianna sobbed, clinging to Camilla's hand. "In the dream she was here, but then she left in the car and didn't come back." Camilla's heart broke for the little girl who carried such a heavy burden of loss. She'd heard the story from Francesca, how Adriano's wife, Elena, had been driving to a doctor's appointment when a drunk driver ran a red light. She'd been pregnant with their second child, and both she and the baby had died on impact. "Your mama didn't want to leave you, Stelina," Camilla said softly, using the endearment Adriano always used. "Sometimes sad things happen that nobody can control, but she loved you so much, and that love is still here in your heart. Are you going to leave too?" Gianna's voice was small and frightened. "The pretty lady with the yellow hair said you might go away." Camilla closed her eyes, fighting back her own tears. How could she promise a child something she wasn't sure she could deliver? "I'm here now," she said instead, "and I love you very much." "I love you too, Mama Camilla." As Camilla began humming a lullaby her own mother had sung to her, she didn't notice the figure standing in the doorway until Gianna's breathing had evened out in sleep. Adriano leaned against the doorframe, his hair mussed and his white dress shirt wrinkled as if he'd been tossing and turning in his own bed. The sight of him in the dim light made her pulse quicken, but it was the expression on his face, raw and vulnerable, that made her breath catch. "She hasn't had nightmares in months," he said quietly, as Camilla carefully extracted herself from Gianna's grip and followed him into the hallway. "She's picking up on the tension," Camilla replied, pulling her robe tighter around herself. "Children are more perceptive than we give them credit for." They walked in silence toward the main staircase, but instead of heading to their respective rooms, Adriano gestured toward the French doors that led to the terrace. "Walk with me?" he asked, and despite every rational thought in her head, Camilla nodded. The Miami night was warm and humid, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine from the gardens. The terrace overlooked the bay, where city lights reflected like scattered diamonds on the dark water. "I can't sleep," Adriano said, moving to lean against the stone balustrade. "Haven't been able to for days." Camilla joined him, careful to maintain some distance between them. "The wedding preparations must be stressful." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The wedding, right." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a yacht move slowly across the bay. In the moonlight, Adriano looked younger somehow, less like the feared Mafia boss and more like a man carrying the weight of impossible choices. "Tell me about your family," he said suddenly, "in Italy." The request surprised her. In 6 months. Their conversations had always centered around Gianna or household matters. Personal topics had been carefully avoided, as if they both understood the danger of getting too close. "There's not much to tell," she said. "My parents have a small farm outside Naples. Olive trees mostly. My father also works construction in the city when he can find it. They're good people, but—" She trailed off, unsure how to explain the suffocating limitations of her old life without sounding ungrateful. "But you wanted more," Adriano finished. "I wanted choices," she said simply. "In my village, a woman has 2 options: marry young and have babies, or become a spinster and take care of her aging parents. I wanted to see what else was possible. And now, do you regret coming here?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to address directly. "No," she said honestly. "Even if it ends badly, I don't regret it." Adriano turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight she could see the conflict playing across his features. "Camilla," he began, then stopped, running a hand through his dark hair. "This situation, what's happening between us—" "Nothing's happening between us," she said quickly, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. "Isn't it?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Because I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop watching the way you are with Gianna, the way you make this house feel like a home instead of just a place to conduct business. Adriano, don't—" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're engaged. You have responsibilities. To a woman I don't love," he said fiercely. "To a marriage that was arranged when I was too grief-stricken to care about my own future. To a life that feels like a prison." The confession hung in the air between them, dangerous and irrevocable. "Your family," she began. "My family wants me to be miserable for the sake of tradition," he cut her off. "They want me to honor agreements made by dead men, to sacrifice any chance of happiness for the sake of business alliances. And what do you want?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He was close enough now that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could see the small scar above his eyebrow, the faint lines around his eyes that spoke of too much responsibility carried too young. "I want to wake up every morning and hear you singing in the kitchen," he said softly. "I want to come home to the sound of you and Gianna laughing together. I want to fall asleep, knowing that the 2 people I care about most in this world are safe under my roof." Camilla's heart hammered against her ribs. "You can't say things like that to me." "Why not?" "Because I'm nobody," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm a girl from a poor family who cleans houses and changes diapers. I'm a man who's been dead inside for 3 years," he interrupted, "until you walked into my house and brought it back to life." Before she could respond, before she could think of all the reasons why this was impossible, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he was giving her the chance to pull away. But when she didn't, when she melted against him instead, the kiss deepened, became urgent and desperate and full of months of suppressed longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Camilla felt like the world had shifted on its axis. "This is crazy," she whispered against his lips. "I know," he replied, resting his forehead against hers. "But I can't pretend anymore that I don't feel this, that I don't want you." The sound of a car door slamming in the driveway broke the spell. They sprang apart just as Franco's voice called out from below. "Boss, we got a problem. Giuseppe Conti's here and he's not happy." Adriano's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The vulnerable man who had just kissed her disappeared, replaced by the cold, calculating leader she'd glimpsed in business meetings. "Go inside," he told her quietly. "Lock your door and don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "What's happening?" "Serena's father," he said grimly. "Which means this is about to get very complicated." As Camilla hurried back into the house, her lips still tingling from his kiss, she heard the sound of multiple car doors and raised voices from the front of the mansion. Whatever was happening, she had a sinking feeling that their stolen moment on the terrace had just made everything infinitely more dangerous. The sound of shouting from the front courtyard sent ice through Camilla's veins as she pressed herself against her bedroom door, straining to hear what was happening below. Through her window she could see the headlights of several black SUVs cutting through the darkness, and the silhouettes of men moving with the kind of purposeful urgency that spoke of serious trouble. "Where is she?" Giuseppe Conti's voice boomed through the mansion, thick with rage and Italian curses. "Where is the little whore who thinks she can steal my daughter's husband?" Camilla's blood turned to ice. Somehow he knew. But how? Adriano's response was too quiet to hear, but the dangerous edge in his tone was unmistakable even from a distance. She'd heard that voice before, during phone calls that made grown men stammer and beg for mercy. A soft knock at her door made her jump, but it was Francesca's voice that came through the wood. "Bambina, let me in, quickly." Camilla opened the door to find the older woman's face creased with worry, her grey hair disheveled as if she'd dressed in haste. "What's happening?" Camilla whispered. "Trouble," Francesca said grimly, pulling her away from the door. "Bad trouble. Giuseppe Conti received photos tonight. You and Mr. Bianchi on the terrace." The bottom dropped out of Camilla's world. "Photos? Someone's been watching, waiting." Francesca's weathered hands gripped Camilla's shoulders. "You need to pack now. Franco is preparing a car." "I'm not running," Camilla said firmly, though her voice shook. "I won't leave Gianna. Child, you don't understand. Giuseppe Conti doesn't make idle threats. If you stay—" The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs cut her off. Both women froze as the footsteps stopped directly outside Camilla's door. "Open it." Luca Conti's voice was cold as winter. "Now." Francesca stepped protectively in front of Camilla, but the younger woman gently moved her aside. If this was happening, she wouldn't hide behind an old woman. She opened the door to find Luca Conti flanked by two men she didn't recognize. Serena's brother had always made her uncomfortable. There was something cruel in his pale eyes that reminded her of a snake preparing to strike. "Miss Romano," he said with mock politeness, "my father would like a word." It wasn't a request. Downstairs, the mansion's formal living room had been transformed into something resembling a tribunal. Giuseppe Conti sat in Adriano's usual chair like a king holding court, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier's light. Serena stood beside him, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. Adriano was across the room, flanked by Franco and two other men Camilla recognized as his most trusted soldiers. The tension in the air was so thick it was hard to breathe. "Ah, the little peasant," Giuseppe said as Camilla was escorted into the room. "Come closer, girl. Let me get a good look at the woman who thinks she can destroy a union blessed by God and family." Camilla forced herself to walk forward, her chin raised, despite the terror coursing through her veins. She could feel Adriano's eyes on her, but she didn't dare look at him. "Papa," Serena said sweetly, "perhaps we should show her the photographs, so she understands the gravity of her situation." Giuseppe nodded to one of his men, who produced a manila envelope. The photos that spilled onto the coffee table made Camilla's cheeks burn with shame, images of her and Adriano on the terrace, caught in their moment of vulnerability and desire. "Touching," Giuseppe said sarcastically. "Young love, very romantic." His voice hardened to steel. "Also very stupid." "The girl is innocent in this," Adriano said, speaking for the first time since Camilla had entered the room. "If you have a problem, it's with me." "Oh, I have many problems with you, Adriano," Giuseppe replied. "But right now my concern is protecting my daughter's honor and our family's alliance. This little distraction threatens both." "She's not a distraction," Adriano said quietly, but his words carried the weight of absolute conviction. "She's nothing," Serena interrupted sharply. "She's nothing. A servant who forgot her place." The dismissal hit Camilla like a physical blow, but it was the flash of pure rage that crossed Adriano's face that truly frightened her. "Watch your mouth," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Or what?" Luca stepped forward, his hand moving toward his jacket. "You'll choose some Italian peasant over your family's honor." The room erupted into chaos. Franco and the other men moved to flank Adriano, while Giuseppe's soldiers mirrored the action. Guns appeared as if by magic, and suddenly Camilla found herself in the middle of a standoff that could turn deadly in seconds. "Enough!" Giuseppe's voice cut through the tension. "No blood will be spilled in this house tonight, but this situation will be resolved." He turned his cold gaze to Camilla. "You have two choices, girl. Leave Miami tonight, leave America entirely, and never contact this family again. Or, Camilla's voice was steadier than she felt, or we'll make sure you disappear permanently, and we'll make sure Adriano watches." The threat hung in the air like poison. Camilla felt the room spinning around her, felt the weight of impossible choices crushing down on her chest. "She's under my protection," Adriano said firmly. "Anyone who touches her answers to me." "Your protection." Giuseppe laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're in no position to protect anyone, boy. You have a choice too. Honor your engagement and marry my daughter as planned, or watch your entire organization crumble. The other families won't support a man who breaks his word for a piece of ass." Adriano moved so fast that Camilla barely saw it happen. One moment he was across the room. The next he had Giuseppe by the throat, his face a mask of deadly fury. "Call her that again," he said softly, "and I'll kill you where you sit." "Adriano, no!" Camilla cried out, but it was Franco who moved, placing a restraining hand on his boss's arm. "Boss," he said quietly, "think about Gianna." The mention of his daughter's name seemed to penetrate Adriano's rage. He released Giuseppe and stepped back, but his eyes never left the older man's face. "You want to threaten me?" Adriano said. "Fine. But understand this. If anything happens to Camilla, if she so much as gets a paper cut, I'll burn your entire organization to the ground. And I'll start with your son." Luca's face flushed with anger, but Giuseppe held up a hand to stop him. "Very passionate," the older man said, straightening his tie. "But passion fades, Adriano. Duty is forever." He stood, signaling that the meeting was over. "You have 48 hours to make your choice. Honor your engagement, or lose everything you've built." As Giuseppe and his men filed out of the room, Serena lingered behind. She approached Camilla with the predatory grace of a cat stalking wounded prey. "You really thought you could have him," she said softly, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're nothing but a temporary amusement. When this is over, when you're gone, he'll forget you ever existed." But as she turned to leave, she paused beside Adriano. "Choose wisely, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet with poison. "Because if you choose her, she'll make sure neither of you lives to regret it." After they were gone, the mansion fell into heavy silence. Camilla stood in the middle of the room, feeling like her world had just collapsed around her. "Pack your things," Adriano said quietly, not looking at her. "Franco will drive you to the airport." The words hit her like a slap. "You're sending me away. I'm keeping you alive." His voice was hollow, defeated. Giuseppe wasn't bluffing. "If you stay, you'll die, and probably take me and Gianna with you." "So that's it?" Tears burned her eyes. "You just give up?" Finally he looked at her, and the pain in his dark eyes nearly brought her to her knees. "What would you have me do, Camilla? Start a war, get innocent people killed? Destroy everything my father built?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking older than his 32 years. "I have responsibilities. You have choices," she said fiercely. "You told me that yourself." "Not anymore." He turned away from her. "Franco will take you to a safe house tonight. Tomorrow you'll be on a plane back to Italy." As Camilla walked toward the stairs on unsteady legs, she heard him add quietly, "I'm sorry." But sorry wouldn't change anything. Sorry wouldn't keep them together or protect the love that had bloomed between them like a flower in concrete. Sorry was just another word for goodbye. The safe house in Little Havana was a far cry from the luxury of the Bianchi mansion. Camilla sat on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at her packed suitcase, while Franco stood guard by the window. She'd been there for 18 hours, and every minute felt like a lifetime. "The flight leaves at noon," Franco said without turning around. "Private jet to Rome. Boss made sure you'd be comfortable." Comfortable? As if anything about this situation could be comfortable. "What about Gianna?" Camilla asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "Who's going to take care of her when she has nightmares?" Franco's shoulders tensed. "Boss will figure it out." "Will he?" Camilla stood, pacing the small room like a caged animal? Or will he just bury himself in work and let that cold woman raise his daughter? It's not your concern anymore, Franco said, but there was something in his voice, doubt, maybe even regret. Isn't it? Camilla moved to stand beside him at the window. Oh, you've known him for years. You've seen what these past 6 months have done to him. He was coming back to life, Franco. He was becoming the man he used to be before Elena died. Franco was quiet for a long moment. Boss is doing what he has to do. He's doing what he thinks he has to do. There's a difference. Before Franco could respond, his phone buzzed. He answered it quickly, his face growing grim as he listened. "We got a problem," he said after hanging up. "Luca Conti and his boys are moving on the mansion. They're not waiting for the deadline." Camilla's blood turned to ice. "Gianna is safe," Franco said quickly. "Boss got her out as soon as the lookout spotted movement, but..." He hesitated. "But what?" "He's staying to face them, alone." The words hit Camilla like a physical blow. She could see it all too clearly. Adriano, proud and stubborn, refusing to run from a fight even when the odds were impossible. "He'll die," she whispered. Franco nodded grimly. "Probably. Luca's got 20 men. Boss has maybe half that, and most of them are scattered across the city." Camilla closed her eyes, her mind racing. There had to be something, some way to stop this madness before it destroyed everything. "The wedding," she said suddenly. "What?" "Serena. She doesn't want Adriano dead. She wants him married to her. If I'm gone, if I'm completely out of the picture, she might call off her brother." Franco shook his head. "Too late for that. This isn't about you anymore. It's about respect, about Adriano defying Giuseppe publicly. Blood has to be spilled now." But Camilla was already moving, grabbing her phone from the nightstand. "What are you doing?" Franco demanded. "Something stupid," she said, dialing a number she'd memorized but never called. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Serena Conti. It's Camilla Romano." The silence on the other end was deafening. Well, Serena said finally. "The little mouse finds her voice. I heard you were leaving the country." "I am. But first, I want to make a deal." Serena's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, darling." "Aren't I?" Camilla forced steel into her voice. "Your brother is about to start a war that will leave half of Miami's Italian families in ruins. The other bosses won't stand for it. They'll see Giuseppe as unstable, dangerous. Is that really what you want for your family's reputation?" Another silence, longer this time. "What kind of deal?" Serena asked finally. "I'll disappear completely. New identity, new life, somewhere far from here. But in exchange, you call off Luca, and you release Adriano from the engagement." "Absolutely not. The engagement stands." "Then you'll be marrying a dead man," Camilla said bluntly. "Because that's what this war will cost you. Adriano won't run, and he won't surrender. He'll fight until his last breath, and he'll take as many of your people with him as he can." She could hear Serena breathing on the other end, could almost see the wheels turning in the other woman's calculating mind. "Even if I agreed," Serena said slowly, "what makes you think I'd honor such a deal? What's to stop me from taking your disappearance and keeping the engagement?" "Because I know something you don't," Camilla said. "Something that could destroy your family's standing with the other bosses." It was a bluff, a desperate gamble based on nothing more than overheard conversations and Francesca's gossip. But Serena's sharp intake of breath told her she'd hit something. "You're lying." "Am I? Ask your father about the shipment that went missing 3 months ago, the one he blamed on dock workers. Ask him where that money really went." The silence stretched so long that Camilla wondered if Serena had hung up. "You have 1 hour," Serena said finally. "Miami International, Terminal D. Come alone, or the deal's off." The line went dead. Franco was staring at her like she'd lost her mind. "You can't be serious. It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Camilla said, already moving toward her suitcase. "But it's also the only chance Adriano has. Boss will never forgive me if I let you walk into that." Camilla turned to face him, and Franco was surprised by the steel in her brown eyes. "Then don't let me," she said quietly. "Help me." For a moment Franco wavered, Then his phone buzzed again, a text message that made his face go pale. "What is it?" Camilla asked. "Gunfire at the mansion," he said grimly. "It started. That decided it." Camilla grabbed her passport and the small amount of cash she had left. "Drive me to the airport," she said, "or I'll take a taxi. Either way, I'm going." Franco stared at her for a long moment, then cursed in Italian and grabbed his keys. "Boss is going to kill me," he muttered. "Only if he lives long enough," Camilla replied. As they raced through Miami's streets, Camilla tried not to think about what she was walking into. She tried not to think about Gianna, who would wake up tomorrow in a world without either of her parents. She tried not to think about Adriano, who might already be bleeding out on the marble floors of his beautiful mansion. Instead, she thought about love, real love, the kind that demanded sacrifice without asking for anything in return, and she prayed that it would be enough. The airport terminal was nearly empty at this hour, but Camilla spotted Serena immediately. The blonde woman sat in the departure lounge like a queen holding court, flanked by two men who looked like they could break necks with their bare hands. "You came," Serena said as Camilla approached. "I wasn't sure you had the spine for it." "Call off your brother," Camilla said without preamble. "Show me the information first." Camilla had been counting on this moment, on Serena's greed overriding her caution. She pulled out her phone and showed Serena a photo, one she'd taken weeks ago when she'd accidentally walked in on Adriano during a business call. It showed documents spread across his desk, shipping manifests and bank transfers that she'd thought nothing of at the time. But now, looking at Serena's face, she realized she'd stumbled onto something significant. "Where did you get this?" Serena demanded. "Does it matter? The question is, what's it worth to you?" Serena studied the photo for a long moment, then made a phone call. She spoke in rapid Italian, too fast for Camilla to follow, but she caught Luca's name and what sounded like orders. "It's done," Serena said finally. "My brother is standing down." Relief flooded through Camilla, but she forced herself to remain calm. "And the engagement?" Serena's smile was cold as winter. "Oh, darling, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." Before Camilla could react, one of Serena's men grabbed her arm in a grip that would leave bruises. "You see," Serena continued conversationally, "I never had any intention of releasing Adriano from our engagement, but I did need you out of the picture permanently. This way I get what I want and you get to disappear just like you promised." Panic clawed at Camilla's throat as she realized the trap had snapped shut around her. But before Serena's men could drag her away, the terminal erupted into chaos. Adriano appeared like an avenging angel, flanked by Franco and a dozen armed men. His white shirt was torn and blood-stained, his face was a mask of deadly fury, and his dark eyes locked onto Camilla's with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Let her go," he said quietly, but his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Adriano," Serena said, her composure cracking for the first time. Did you really think I wouldn't have the airport watched?" He stepped closer, and Camilla could see the small cuts on his face, the way he favored his left side. "Did you think I'd let you take her without a fight?" "This is a public place," Serena said desperately. "You can't—" "I can do whatever I want," Adriano cut her off, "because as of 20 minutes ago your father is dead." The words hit the terminal like a bomb. Serena went white as paper. "You're lying." "Giuseppe made the mistake of thinking I'd fight fair," Adriano said coldly. "He was wrong. While he was sending Luca to my house, I was visiting his. Amazing how vulnerable a man becomes when he thinks his enemy is trapped." Serena's men released Camilla and reached for their weapons, but they were already surrounded. Franco's boys had moved into position while everyone's attention was focused on the confrontation. "It's over, Serena," Adriano said. "Your family's finished. The other bosses won't support a leaderless organization, especially one that broke the peace first." But Serena wasn't finished. With the desperate fury of a cornered animal, she pulled a small pistol from her purse and aimed it directly at Camilla's heart. "If I can't have you," she snarled, "then no one can." Time seemed to slow. Camilla saw Adriano's face change, saw him start to move, but he was too far away. She closed her eyes and thought of Gianna. of the little girl who would grow up without her. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. But when Camilla opened her eyes, she was still standing. Serena lay crumpled on the floor, Franco's smoking gun still pointed at where she'd been standing. "Nobody threatens the boss's family," Franco said grimly. And then Adriano was there, pulling Camilla into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Don't you ever," he said against her hair, "ever do something that stupid again." "I had to," she whispered. "I couldn't let you die. And I couldn't let you go." He pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes blazing with emotion. "I love you, Camilla. I choose you. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, I choose you. But your family, your responsibilities, you are my family," he said fiercely. "You and Gianna. Everything else is just business." As sirens wailed in the distance and Franco's men melted away into the night, Adriano cupped Camilla's face in his hands. "Marry me," he said. "Not because of duty or family alliances, but because I can't imagine a life without you in it." Through her tears, Camilla smiled. "Yes," she whispered, "yes to everything." And as he kissed her there in the chaos of the terminal, surrounded by the wreckage of the old world and the promise of something new, Camilla finally understood what it meant to be chosen. Not because she was convenient or appropriate or safe, but because she was loved. Years later, the sound of laughter echoed through the gardens of the Bianchi estate as Gianna chased her little brother through the olive trees that Camilla had planted in honor of her family's farm in Italy. "Mama, Marco's being mean!" 8-year-old Gianna called out in the mix of Italian and English that had become the family's natural language. "No, I'm not," 4-year-old Marco protested, his dark curls bouncing as he ran. "I'm being a dragon." Camilla smiled as she watched her children play, one hand resting on her rounded belly where their third child grew. The morning sickness had finally passed, and she was enjoying this peaceful moment before the day's responsibilities began. "They get that from you, you know," Adriano said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "The dramatic flair. They get that from their father," she corrected, leaning back against his solid warmth. "I seem to remember someone who once threatened to burn down half of Miami for love." "And I'd do it again," he murmured against her neck, making her shiver despite the warm Florida morning. The past few years hadn't been easy. Rebuilding the organization after the war with the Contis had taken time and careful negotiation. Some of the older families had been resistant to accepting Camilla, but Adriano's unwavering support and her own quiet strength had eventually won them over. More importantly, they'd found ways to legitimize much of the business. The shipping company was now completely legal, and Adriano had invested heavily in real estate and technology. He was still feared and respected, but now it was for his business acumen rather than his capacity for violence. "Papa! Mama!" Gianna ran toward them, her face flushed with excitement. "Dr. Lucia is here. She brought the new baby pictures. Dr. Lucia had become more than just the children's pediatrician over the years. She was a close family friend who had helped Camilla navigate the challenges of raising children in their unique circumstances. "She's in the kitchen with Francesca," Gianna continued breathlessly. "They're looking at the ultrasound pictures and making bets about whether it's a boy or girl." Adriano chuckled. "And what do you think, Stellina?" "I think it's a sister," Gianna said confidently. "Marco needs someone to boss him around besides me." As they walked toward the house together, Camilla caught sight of their reflection in the French doors, a family, complete and happy and real. Sometimes she still couldn't believe this was her life. "Any regrets?" Adriano asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. She looked at him, this man who had chosen love over duty, who had rebuilt his entire world around their family, and smiled. "Only one," she said. His eyebrows rose in concern. "What?" "That it took us so long to find each other," she finished, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. As their children's laughter filled the air and the Miami sun painted everything golden, Camilla thought about the scared young woman who had arrived at this mansion years ago with nothing but dreams and determination. She had come looking for opportunity and found something infinitely more precious, a love worth fighting for, a family worth protecting. and a future bright with endless possibilities. Ti amo, Adriano whispered against her lips, using the Italian words that had become their private language of love. Ti amo anch'io, she replied, her heart full to overflowing. And in that perfect moment, surrounded by the life they had built together from the ashes of impossible circumstances, Camilla knew that some fairy tales were worth the fight, and that's where our incredible journey ends here at Passion and Power. Love truly conquered all for Adriano and Camilla, proving that sometimes the heart knows what it wants, even when the mind says it's impossible. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more breathtaking romance stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more unforgettable tales of love, passion, and triumph. Until next time, keep believing in the power of true love.